AP style in the context of copy editing, I want to start out by just mentioning where AP style comes from. It comes from the AP, the Associated Press, which was a organization that formed in 1846 to share content among news organizations. So at the time the Mexican-American War is going on, the news publications in New York City basically said to each other, we can't afford to have all this coverage, but we need to have all this coverage, so can we share resources? So they started sharing stories and would publish a story and have it say that it was came from the Associated Press. You still see that today in newspapers and online, that a news organization will have a story and it'll be from the AP, from that wire service is what we called it. So the style book itself was first published in 1909. It's been around for quite a while. We use it to create uniformity so that, when you report on something, the way you report on it, the words you use and how you use them are like other reporters. It basically makes things easier to read. It also creates a language that is spoken by journalists and PR professionals. So it's something that you need to know if you're in those industries. It sets out basic rules for things like dates, numbers, dollars, chimes, addresses, titles, names, composition titles, and abbreviations. We'll talk about a few of these today, but those are really kind of the big things that the AP tells us how to do. If you can't find something, if there's only one way to do it, just so you know, there's the AP really generally there's only one way to do it. So if you can't find it something, or you're finding multiple ways, I should capitalize this here or I should capitalize this there. Go to the dictionary as your secondary source, okay? So AP style book is your first source, dictionary is your second source. Capitalize sparingly, meaning if you can't decide if it should be capitalized, just don't. You're usually better off that way. Don't use an Oxford comma, which means don't use the comma before the and in a list. So if we're going to buy milks, eggs, and grocery, or milks, eggs, and bread, we're going to have a comma between milk and eggs, or gosh, I'm really struggling with this one today. But I have a comma between milk and eggs, but not before bread. There's no comma before the and. Okay, so that's an Oxford comma is what we call that. We don't use it, but your English classes very well might. We generally spell out 1 through 9. We don't write them as numerals. We generally spell them out, but we'll talk in a minute about what kind of some of the specifics are for that. I just put this up as a brief explanation for copy editors. I thought this makes sense. Copy editors make sure a text is readable, accurate, and ready for publication. So that's really what you're trying to do at the end of the day. There are a lot of rules, but you're really just trying to make sure that something is, able to be read. Your text talks about the 3 C's of copy editing: clarity, when the reporter says what they mean to say, when they're clear; conciseness, when they use short words, sentences, and paragraphs; and correctness, when all the information is accurate. That's something that later in the semester we'll be talking about fact checking, and you guys as copy editors, part of your job is to be kind of the last person to put eyes on the copy, and so you're going to be looking for, is the information correct? Okay, a little bit on abbreviations. Months, you can abbreviate when they come with dates. So February 9th can be FEB period 9, but just February by itself has to be spelled out. Addresses are very similar. If you have a number with them, so if you have like 3 or 4 Smith Street, then you can abbreviate street. Okay, avenue, boulevard, and street are the only ones that you can abbreviate. You can't abbreviate drive or lane or circle. I often remember these by thinking abs, right? Like that doesn't connect to anything here, but avenue, boulevard, and street is an acronym for abs. Okay, we're not using any courtesy titles in AP style, so you wouldn't ever see Mr. or Miss. The New York Times does this a little differently, so you do see it if you look at the New York Times copy. But the rule is never to use them. Just first and last name on first reference, last name after that. No doctor unless they're a medical doctor, because if we have a situation where you're reporting on, or a story is reporting on like a car wreck that's happened, and let's say somebody's come to help and it was me, Dr. Cowart came to the aid of the victim, it's going to sound to the reader like Dr. Cowart was a medical doctor, but obviously I'm not. So the way AP wants you to do it is to use the name and just say PhD after the name if you need to. A lot of times you don't even need the doctor or PhD, but you can put it after the name as like, so the name and then PhD, or they have a PhD in, if that's relevant, but no doctor unless they're a medical doctor. Military and legislative titles, I just say look those up. I don't have a good way to remember them. I always look them up myself. So just have your style book handy. Acronyms, you can look in the AP style book. You can also look in the dictionary as your secondary, source for information. They'll have the AP style book will have things like the WHO, can be used instead of World Health Organization. Okay, capitalize the title before the name. So when we're talking about a person who has a title and we put it before their name, we're going to capitalize it. Okay, if we put the title after the name, then it's lowercase. Pretty straightforward, but you just got to remember the before is when you capitalize, when it comes directly before. Okay, couple more things on capitalization and we're going to be done. Composition titles are generally capitalized, so the show Friends is actually in quotation marks and capitalized. Don't capitalize plurals of common nouns. So if you have, for example, Oak and Main Streets, as opposed to Main Street, you would capitalize Main and Street. But if you have Oak and Main, then you don't capitalize it. I don't like that rule. It's kind of hard to remember. Seasons only get capitalized with proper nouns. So you say the winter capitalized Olympics, or my favorite season is winter, not capitalized. Make good sense? Okay. Oh no, I'm sorry. I do have one more. All right. Hang with me, guys. This is it. Generally, you spell out numbers below 10. We've already said that. Time of day is always a numeral, except for noon and midnight. So you probably won't have any problem writing numerals for time of day, but when you get to 12 p.m. or 12 a.m., you're going to write noon or midnight, because 12 a.m. and 12 p.m. are confusing. That's why. Ages are numerals. So if you're 12 years old, it's a number. If you're 2 years old, it's a number. Okay, the below 10 rule doesn't apply there. They're always numerals. Measurements and distances. Okay, so miles are always numerals. Years are always numerals. All right, that's it for me. Y'all have a good day.